Andy Burnham. Welcome to Do I Sound Like I Care, the podcast. It looks a little bit different from our normal podcast. For those people listening to the podcast, not watching it, we're actually in one of the offices in your building.
You are. Well, thank you, Louise, for having me on. And welcome to the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, because that's where you are.
Ah, thank you. I wondered.
And yeah, this is a makeshift studio, isn't it? Right above Oxford Street, just as it becomes Oxford Road.
Yeah, so there'll also be a few buses going up and down there.
There might be, and I'll be checking whether they're on time as I see them come past.
And checking whether they're one of the amazing yellow buses.
Yes. So one of the biggest changes that I've overseen since becoming mayor is putting buses back under public control. But hopefully for those in Greater Manchester who've experienced the yellow buses, I think they're quite a step up when it comes to older people living with dementia.
So transport, close to your heart. We're actually here to talk about caring, because this podcast is made by carers for carers about being a carer. And is that a subject that's close to your heart?
Yes, it is, professionally, because when I was health secretary, God, I'm showing my age now, 15 years ago, I was persuaded of the need to do something radical in this space back then. I've always been persuaded ever since. So I've kept that professional interest, but I'm now of an age in my 50s where I've seen care services myself because of one of my parents having dementia. That reinforces, I think, many of my kind of professional instincts about why this issue should have been given a much higher priority many years ago.
So can I ask a little bit about your family and how, who is it who has dementia and what how's it impacted on them?
Yeah, so my dad has got Alzheimer's, and it's been a really tough journey the last few years. My dad had some cancer treatment in the sort of back end of the pandemic. And it felt to me as though that accelerated things. And I wonder whether that's something that, we need more public information about, how if you have physical treatment for something, it can have that impact on your sort of mental well-being. And it seemed as though it did to me. And in retrospect, as a family, I'm not sure we would have maybe made some different choices with my dad.
So there were no signs of dementia or anything like that prior to? Because I had a similar experience during lockdown. Mum fell and her undiagnosed dementia was on the radar because she had to have a hip replacement. I kind of already had a feeling that she had memory problems, and there was lots of signs that she couldn't really cope and live on her own. But you're saying your dad wasn't showing any signs?
Not to me and my brothers. Maybe my mum was sort of picking up the first signs, but not to us. And the treatment he had was for prostate cancer. And it's a very intensive, short burst of treatment every day. So it kind of takes a physical toll. And it just seems to me that those two things were connected, and we hadn't thought through that there may be other implications beyond the treatment. I think that is a real problem with the kind of the system that we've got. I love the health service. I will defend it to my dying day, but it is a overly medical, overly treatment-based service, and it looks at physical health more than it looks at mental health. And I do think those are sort of quite 20th century notions. And I think in the 21st century, as we look at the full complexity of an aging society, we have to rethink and recalibrate, I think, how you look after the whole person.
I mean, that's really interesting, because as a carer, and particularly a carer for dementia, a lot of the services overlap, and sometimes it can be a complete mystery. In fact, I've been doing it for 3 years, and I'll be honest, I don't really know how it works. It sort of works, but I just don't know how all the different pieces of the jigsaw fit together. And some aspects of caring for my mum with her dementia are handled by the NHS, and some by social care, and some in the community. I think it's just so complex, the way it all fits together.
So complex. Yeah, I think what I would say is it sometimes can just about work for people, but that very much depends on people's circumstances and their family situation, doesn't it? But there are many people for whom it really does not work. In my dad's case, something came through towards the point where he was moving towards residential care that, I think needs a political response. And it's the whole question of a domiciliary care service that really is just not set up to do what it should do and actually be preventative in terms of the support that it provides. And it's this kind of 15-minute visit culture, isn't it? And the rush.
Yeah.
My dad was in a position where, with a little time and a bit of patience, he could have been kind of moved from where he was to a position where he was comfortable for the rest of the day. And then that would have been something that, my mum could have managed and it would have been acceptable. But it's not like that, is it? It was a rush, and if my dad wasn't being cooperative, as we experienced, what happened repeatedly was a kind of rush from some of the carers who came in to say, well, we have to ring 999 now.
Wow. Straight to 999?
Straight. Yeah. And I knew there was an element of this that goes on. Yeah. It's particularly sort of some of these small care companies who just don't want any liability for any. They have the 15-minute visit structure. That's how they're commissioned. And anything that's a problem outside of that, well, we are not going to be liable. Therefore, and it was difficult for my mum, who often had to talk them out of ringing 999. She was saying, well, no, it's not good for my husband, but it's going to be terrible for the NHS as well. And, everyone, it's a lose-lose for everybody.
Totally.
It was not a one-off. It happened on a number of occasions.
Wow.
One or two where I kind of got involved. And if you aggregate it up, that's just our family experience. I think every day across England, there will be significant numbers of very vulnerable people going into hospitals and ambulances who actually don't need to be in that position if just a little more time was given to settling people in their environment, given that the transition from waking up in the morning to a position where they can be comfortable for the day is actually a complicated transition. It's not a simple set of tasks.
Completely.
It can be different one day from the next day. And this is obviously a learning thing for us as a family.
Yeah, totally. I had that experience of the 15-minute care culture. So when Mum was discharged from hospital, her social worker was prepared to let me take over as full-time carer as long as there was some professional personal care happening. And I think that's because Mum really resisted that. And when she was being looked after in hospital and then later in a care home environment. And I knew she would resist it from me because I'm her daughter. I'm not supposed to be washing her. It's meant to be the other way around. And so she just didn't want to, there was a battle. And I was worried that she, would fall in the shower. I wasn't qualified or trained for this. I'm, an unpaid family carer. I'm not able to do this. But I didn't know where to find a care company. I didn't really know how it worked. And, this is when caring comes upon you just like that. You don't know. So the social worker in the hospital said they would make some inquiries and find a care company. And so they appointed a company that would do normal kind of council contracts, which is the 15-minute culture. That was really difficult because, not only are the carers under a lot of pressure, I think they call it a run. They go from job to job to job to job. But as recipients of the care, it's also changeable. You've got a window when they're supposed to come.
Yeah. You can't
and they don't
make it a production line like that, can you? And it's no criticism of those carers, by the way. I some of them are just unbelievable people, aren't they? And the fact that they still do it, given the treatment they get, the pay, the lack of respect for what they do, and it's a really skilled thing that they do.
It is.
And society just doesn't sort of recognise that, does it, properly? But I think the issue is in what you said about the company that was appointed. I just take the view that this whole area does not sit well with a sort of very formulaic, production line, private sector, drive out the inefficiency type. It just doesn't, it's classic territory for the public sector for me, because you can't commoditize care like that. That there's a 15-minute visit and that's it. It just doesn't work. And because the thing is, it doesn't provide what the NHS needs. The NHS needs people who can be supported in their homes to stay in their homes, and that's better for everybody. And also staff who are trained properly, paid properly, with the right terms of secure employment, and able to do that capable first line of defence, if you like, in terms of supporting people. And instead, it's the opposite, isn't it? 0 hours contracts, poverty pay, to be honest. That's what it is. And it's amazing that it does kind of hold together for some people. And the reason it does is because of the goodwill of some of those people who will sort of make it work.
How did your mum find it? Tell me how she coped with that caring role. Was she
best,
primary carer? She was the main carer for you.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And at its best, it really worked. And she got to know some fantastic people who supported my dad, and I'm sure she would forever be grateful. She'd say that. And the issue came as things got more difficult. That's where the issue came, and there was no reflection again on the people who were coming in to try and help him. None at all. Quite the opposite. In fact, it became an issue of the system in which they are asked to work. I.e., if there's a problem, and there was a problem some days around my dad cooperating and doing what was asked of him, if there was a problem, immediately it just wasn't supportive to her, because then it became stressful. And that was then she would ring me or my brother or my other brother, and it was adding to a burden on her, not taking one away. And that was then when it became completely counterproductive. So I think there's a level at which a very basic 15-minute model with very mild needs can work, but it quickly doesn't work in a situation where the needs are moderate or more severe. To be honest, I'm amazed that my mum managed it all for as long as she did. And it was a wonderful moment. My dad's in a great care home. The organisation who run it's called Nugent Care. I think their origins are as a Catholic care charity. And that is very right for my mum, and by extension my dad, who not particularly religious, but my mum is. But it just works. It works for her. I remember one of the early visits that we did, and one of the carers who work in the home said, "God, how did you manage all of this so long?" Because my mum had, I think, a feeling of guilt when that change had happened.
I'll bet.
And I saw the change in her face when the carers said that to her. It's really hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the feel, when you say, do I sound like I care? Well, for people who are carers like my mum, the mix of emotions that are going round all the time, the lack of sleep, the kind of everything in terms of how you hold it together is almost beyond belief, isn't it? And I've seen that in my own experience. And, but the fact that people do hold it together, but the failure of the system is putting undue pressure and feelings of guilt and you name it on people who actually are working beyond wonders, aren't they, in terms of what they are managing to do.
It sounds like your mum also had support from you and your brothers. You talk about it, us, we. You seem very hands-on, very involved in it. What was your particular journey through the caring experience then? How have you found it?
It's been a hard journey. I mean, and if I'm honest, I've played my part, but my other brothers, both of them are in very senior positions in education. I mean, one of my eldest brother has probably done more than I have, but I've tried to, be part of the team, and I have been, but perhaps not having the same capacity as the others to help. It's just been a kind of a really difficult journey, where you kind of see the change, and the first time you see that change, I can remember now the first time my dad said something to me, and I remember the shock of it, realizing that something was really changing within, in him. And it was, that is a bit of a a trauma, isn't it, that you then have to deal with, and just then all of it really, the kind of progression.
What did he say? What was the thing that shocked you? Because it's surprising. It can be something
that he could see something outside, and he kept saying to me, "Could I see it?" And I kept saying,
those kind of hallucinations, the delirium.
That was a really hard thing. And then there's a whole thing. I mean, this is slightly. My dad's a lifelong Evertonian, and he inflicted this sort of burden on me and Nick and John. And in those stages, we were still taking him with us to watch Everton, but Everton being in a relegation battle as they have been for the last few years, it was all like I don't know. We all kind of started to feel the sort of the weight of it all. Kind of everything around us was these institutions, and things were changing, and not necessarily for the better, and it all became. But eventually, then we had to stop taking him, and that was a bit of a thing as well, and.
Landmark moment, really.
Yeah, I think what I've discovered is your 50s are quite hard, aren't they?
They really are.
For those, if you have parents and kids, not everybody does. And firstly, I should say, not everybody is blessed to be in that situation, are they? And
of course.
And I keep saying all the time that we're blessed in so many ways, and we are. And I always will acknowledge that. However, there does come a point in life, isn't it, where you have kids in their late teenage, early 20s years, and all of that involves, and supporting your mum and dad as well. It's a tougher decade than I counted on it being.
I know. They talk about that. Technically, that's known as a sandwich carer. So you've got your two lots of care, and you're in the middle.
As I say, and I'm getting off lightly, if you like, but it's not a great phrase to use. But you know what I mean when I say that. But
you sound pretty involved to me, considering you're the mayor of Greater Manchester. I would have thought you wouldn't have 2 minutes to do anything.
No, we're a close family, and it never wouldn't be any other way. And I do what I try and offer to Nick and John what I can do, and we've all done things together. And I've taken my mum to things that I know would be beneficial to her as part, because that's a really important part of it as well, isn't it?
What do you mean?
Respite of. Just events, that I know she would enjoy. So, that's...
Respite's really, really important. And, sometimes it's just time to do something for yourself as a carer, or just to feel like your old self. So if it was something that you used to enjoy and that you just can't get out of the house to do.
Massively so.
And it can be just such a boost that gets you through the next...
circumstances, different... sort of scene. So we've all cared in one way or another.
Because a lot of carers will ring their children. A lot of carers and parents will ring their children in their 50s when they need help with the caring, and they'll say, "Oh, can you help? I need some help with this." When your mum rings you, does she expect you to pull some strings at work? Ever?
No, not like that.
That's a shame.
Well, she did ring me once. I was in. I'd been on. I think I'm trying to remember when exactly this was. I'd been on the Laura Koonsberg programme on a Sunday, and I'd ended up staying in London because I had some things happening on the Monday. Mm-hmm. And I remember that Monday morning, was it like 7:30, Mum calling? I was like, oh my God. And my dad was having a situation, but Nick and John were just not available.
Right.
And I think that was the moment that it was the first moment that had happened when none of us were available. Yeah. And, because up to that point, fortuitously, someone had always been around. Okay, I'll pop, I'll come over.
What help was she asking for?
It was because, my dad was just uncooperative, and
did it take you?
And the carers had arrived, and they were saying, we can't deal with this. And I think it was one of those 999 type things. But then we just, and we'd always been the kind of family that said, we wouldn't ever want to see any of us go into a care home, and that wouldn't be us, and we would manage it. I remember as health secretary saying things like, some ways we don't necessarily want residential care. We should be looking at a future of care all in the home. And I think that's possible, but only if you had a completely different social care system. It could be done, but you'd have to really massively increase the resources available to it. So the reality is it's not possible, is it, in the current world? And I can now see the hugely important role that residential care plays.
Yeah.
Because also I see the improvement in my dad since he went in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
there's
good.
quite a significant, he's much more settled and at ease and more capacity. More capacity has come back, which is amazing, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a real positive.
Oh, that's really comforting, I think, for carers to hear, because they might want to just keep trying and trying and trying, especially with dementia. And especially as well, I guess, with if it's your husband or your wife or your lifelong partner, because we're caring for our parents, which kind of feels, even though it's not the natural order, we've become the parent effectively, that kind of feels like a completely different relationship in terms of the person that you've spent your life with, and our parents got married for life and took those vows seriously.
That's part of the hard bit of this, isn't it? I was saying to you before about in your 50s, it gets hard because you have to then do things that you never imagined yourself having to do to look after your dad. You're in situations that you would have kind of recoiled at, wouldn't you? But you know what I mean when I'm saying that. So, but it has to be done. But that's another adjustment, isn't it? But, I'm also conscious, though, that, I'm describing a situation here as though, this is all uniquely difficult. But it's not, is it? Because there are some people who are carers all of their lives, aren't they, in terms of carers for parents with disabilities or kids with disabilities.
Yeah.
And I was just quite struck, actually, by something I was looking at yesterday, as it kind of stood out a little in the kind of frenetic exchanges of the general election campaign, Ed Davey opening up about some of his caring life. And I thought that was really great of him to do that, actually. I thought it was a really important thing that he'd done. I mean, because you think twice about talking personally about these things as a politician, because you think, well, do people think I'm looking for sympathy or votes or something from this? And you're not. I mean, the politicians use this to kind of raise these issues up the agenda and give visibility to the people who are often feeling hidden. And that's why I would talk about it. And I kind of also saw that Ed Davey was doing something really, really important. I don't know if you saw the video that he's posted, but I thought it was really great, actually. It was really touching, but it was really fantastic. And we kind of need more of that in the political domain, not kind of doing it and therefore vote for me, because it's much more about, okay, we understand this reality, we see it, we appreciate it. Yeah. What can collectively we do about it?
Yeah. It seemed to have a lot of empathy because he's experienced, and there's no substitute for being care experienced. And
I didn't know that about him, I'll be honest.
Did you not?
No,
really?
No. It was a revelation to me, so I just didn't know. And I think this is the sort of world we're in now, where politicians, I think, increasingly shut that stuff off because of social media and a comment. We will deal with any of the most, I don't know, vicious comments about us that we're used to that. We've got an armour to deal with that. But I know nearly all the politicians I know, when people do that about family, then it's like different level, and you really can't cope with that. So opening up that side of things is and I think sometimes truthfully politicians stray away from this territory for those reasons. They just don't want to even open up that sort of side of them to anything.
Yeah. I think it's not just politicians either, because there is a kind of stigma around being a carer. I know that sounds crazy, but because it's undervalued and because you're a bit invisible, it's linked with a lot of poverty and financial problems. And if you're doing it and you're trying to stay in work, you don't want it to be seen as a disadvantage.
You don't want to necessarily sort of come in and say, woe is me because of X, Y, and Z.
Or be overlooked for an opportunity because you've got this big caring burden, or your colleagues have to pick up the slack for you.
If I look at it and I hear what you say, and I know that applies what you've just said to millions of people in Britain. So we're not talking small numbers, are we?
No. I mean, is it 5.7 million carers, 1.5 million more than 50 hours a week?
And beyond those numbers, there are people like me. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a carer, although I have. Would I? I don't know. It's interesting that.
Interesting.
I mean, maybe I am now. But maybe was for a bit. But now my dad's in residential care. Maybe not. So anyway, there's levels of caring, isn't there? Just let me put it
care experienced.
Yeah. But beyond that 5 million, I think there are probably others more on the fringes of caring, if I could put it that way. but also those young carers. I often think about, of all the caring jobs. I mean, we can sort of say how hard it is in your 50s, but my God, if you're a young carer looking after parents in your teenage years, that is, well, that's just something that is utterly heroic, is it not? For those and what they do and how hidden they are from everyone's view.
Yeah.
And the thing that just makes me feel, and this great conversation is bringing out this feeling again, people like myself really should be embarrassed about it in terms of the lack of visibility that all of this has in the political debate and the lack of visibility that those millions of people have in political discourse. What does that say to those people who are just out there and they never hear themselves talked about? They never hear themselves sort of being prioritised in the political discourse. And this pattern, I'm afraid, just keeps on repeating. And I accept my responsibility in that. I mean, I, as I said before, I did try and do something, but have I done enough? No, and I don't think any politician has. I think there's a real, and I'll call it as it is, I'm afraid, in my generation of politicians, there's a complete cowardice on these issues.
Wow.
Cowardice. And it's a sort of kind of thing about, the focus groups don't raise it, therefore never touch it. You don't need to. It only becomes an issue about tax, and you don't want to get an issue. And there's this sort of modern politics has just has developed a framing of the way it deals with things that just has this outside of it. Wow. And it is a wow thing because it is that bad. I mean, I lived it. I mean, bear in mind, I lived it trying to raise social care in Whitehall. Yeah, and it made me an outsider for even trying to do something.
So what was your plan that you were trying to raise, just for those that don't know? In fact, for me, because I don't think I fully know, were you trying to integrate? Tell me exactly what you did.
I mean, I was, in very simple terms, I was making the argument for social care to be provided on NHS terms.
What does that mean exactly?
So free at the point of use. Yeah.
Wow,
and
that would be great.
A national care service, I called it at the time. But what I was kind of make the argument for was whether you have it as a national care service alongside a national health service or whether you have a national health and care service. What I was saying was you have a continuum of care on NHS terms that goes from home to hospital and back again and is about the whole person. So you look at people's physical, mental and social needs as one and not, as the current system tries to do, deal with physical needs in one place and mental in another and then social in a completely different system altogether. That's what I was saying. And I made the argument that rather than be exposed to unlimited care costs, well, I say unlimited, can be pretty much unlimited down to that threshold of £23,000, whatever it is. I was saying that nobody should pay any care charges while they're alive. But what we should do in return is have a modest contribution from what they leave behind that is a percentage contribution linked to what they have. Okay. And therefore you wouldn't get the randomness of the system where some people like my dad or someone else who's unlucky enough to get quite severe dementia and Alzheimer's, well, they get wiped out completely, don't they, by the current system?
Savings wise, you mean? And financially.
And then somebody who just doesn't have that isn't wiped out. Yeah. And I was saying, that social care in England is as unfair as US healthcare because it just takes people out randomly, doesn't it, linked to how unfortunate they are. And I was saying that's completely counter to the NHS principle. Yeah. And until we have a system in this country that supports people with dementia as well as it supports and treats people with cancer, then we haven't got a fair system in the 21st century. Mm. But when I put that forward, the idea of a care levy, from what people leave behind, don't put people through any of the indignity of selling homes and this and that and power of attorney just leave all that. Let people not have to deal with that stuff while they're caring, because it's hard enough doing the caring, never mind all of that.
It is.
And the paying and the dispiriting thing of just paying your parents' savings out for leave all of that, and then a modest contribution is taken from everybody. And anyway, that quickly became, now Gordon wants a death tax from you at the 2010 election, and it was a horrendously toxic political debate, and it made me a kind of outsider in my own side, as though I'd I'd opened up an Achilles heel at the election, and this is the sadness for me, and that, does today's generation of politicians have the wherewithal to advance big solutions to the things that are obviously wrong in our society? And I hope I can be proved wrong at some point, but I'm still worrying that today's political culture does not support that type of thinking.
And I think that's what it needs. We talked about a carer feeling like there's all these different services, they're not joined up. Well, that would help with that problem that you have. I myself have been in that situation that you're talking about, where I ended up researching and finding a care company that actually will come for almost the full hour, and their staff seem to have that time and the patience and what you were talking about that your mum needed. But in order to pay for that, we have to pay for it because mum made the mistake of saving for her old age, I suppose, is which that generation did. And that's okay. It should go on her care. She made provision, but the cost of it is so extortionate that I don't know how sustainable that will be. And then what happens when she can't have it anymore? So there's all that worry.
You get whittled down to that threshold, don't you? And then you get state.
Then you go
support.
back onto the 15 minutes, and then eventually, that's just going to end up with her.
It doesn't work in any way, shape, or form, does it? But even from that more economic point of view, about it almost, you could say, will increasingly create the wrong incentive. People say, well, I won't bother saving for my retirement because I might lose it all. I don't get rewarded for having done that. Yeah. So it's just not a sustainable situation, is it? And there's no solution for the NHS without a solution for social care.
And the role of the unpaid family carer for sort of propping that up. I think there's a lot more stress on us. I mean, I've only been doing this for 3 years, and there are people who've been caring out there for so much longer, like some people for the whole lifetime, as you say, or some people who've been certainly doing it longer than me and have seen a lot of changes. But our role is really important, but the pressure upon us then is made more so.
But if you had a much more capable, responsive National Health and Care Service that would come in and provide heavy lifting type support in the home, then I think carers would be supported to provide the extra bits of stuff that they then could do, and you could see how this thing could work. I'll never stop arguing for it, never. I mean, I've only become stronger in my feeling that it's got to be done at some point.
Well, I'd love that in my case, because I had to give up work, which was not something I wanted to do. But again, that sort of adds to burdens in other parts of the economy.
It's a drag on the economy, eventually, isn't it? With experienced people leaving the labour market. That,
again, in your 50s, there's been a huge exodus.
Your experience, I think, is valid, is very relevant, isn't it? In that, those people who had those difficult caring situations in the pandemic, some people decided, well, I won't be going back to work. I'll just try and make whatever I've got now to support me, and I'll look at you. So there's been a loss of people in the labour market, hasn't there? And that has created an economic challenge. So it doesn't add up.
It's all linked.
It is all linked. And I just think the country needs a bit of a big sort of moment of come at this a completely different way.
What has it taught you? What has going through this journey with your dad and with your mum and being part of a family? And I think it takes a family to do this. And your family sounds amazing. Not all siblings get on. You might have had your moments. I don't know. I'm not going to pry, but
no. It's absolutely taught me that my brothers and my mum and my dad, and we're everything that we thought we were, if you know what I mean. So that's been something. Obviously, there's real positives in all of this.
How is your mum doing now?
Thanks for asking. I think the word would be recovering, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but, brilliant in so many ways. And we keep telling her to be proud of what she managed to do. And, we are really proud of her and of my dad. And, he, thankfully, although, we've lost some of my dad in terms of he's kept a sort of sort of a contentment about him, I think, is the way to put it.
Yeah.
And since he's gone into care, I think my mum and dad's connection has improved a bit again. And so
that's good.
I said we've lots to feel blessed about, and this isn't woe is us, and but I think as a politician you can't see these things with your own eyes and say, okay, there's nothing else for me to talk about here. There is a lot to talk about, isn't there? There's a lot to put in the public domain, and I hope by speaking that there are some people who listen to this podcast who just might feel a bit more seen and have a bit more visibility in the public and political debate as a result.
And one last question. As a son, putting the politician, how's it been for you?
Well, hard in that it's hard for anybody who has quite big professional demands, but then, to me, I often find that, my job, and this was true when I was an MP and a minister as well, is doable when there's quite minimal stuff going on in the personal space. Where it becomes undoable is when you've got difficult stuff happening in the professional space. And I know that'll be something that, that everyone...
A lot of people
there's a point
working,
you can feel the tipping point close at times, can't you? And some days you can feel it's right at your door, can't you? But not every day.
And caring can affect anyone at any time, at any level.
It can indeed. And as I say, I come back to it, credit to Ed Davey, but also Ed Balls, a former colleague of mine who's spoken out about the care he provided for his mum, and I think we need more of that, definitely. And we need an honest conversation about what 21st century care looks like. We can do better than this.
Well, I'm so grateful to you for coming and talking about your experience of care, Andy. I think you're a beacon, and a lot of people will relate to it. And I'm just so grateful for your honesty and for sharing.
Well, it's great to come on. I don't know about a beacon, but I mean, what I absolutely will be as a voice on it. I always have been. That's why I was really pleased to come on. I love what you do. It sounds like something that I would recommend so strongly to everybody. It's a podcast, I'm sure, that gives a lot of encouragement to people in some pretty difficult moments, because I have learned that some days are really bleak, are they not, for people who care? And they need a lift, and I'm sure you provide it.
Well, thank you, Andy. You sound like you care.
I like to think I do.
I think you do. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Thank you for listening. And please like, subscribe, follow, and join our community of unpaid family carers on the Do I Sound Like I Care socials at CarerPodcast. Do I Sound Like I Care is a Libra Studios production and was produced and edited by David Barnes. See you next time.